Welcome to On Leadership, a midweek podcast from HDBB. We believe leadership is a posture, not a position, and in the same way postures can be improved, leaders can grow. We want to encourage you to keep going and to equip you with practical ways to grow as a leader. Thanks for tuning in to On Leadership.
Dr Kathleen, it is my pleasure to be having this conversation with you for this week's episode on leadership. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to do this conversation. I'm really excited actually about this chat today on our topic on how to grow great. And actually, before we go into this conversation, I think some congratulations are in order. Recently, you've been conferred a datukship. For our friends outside of Malaysia, that is perhaps the equivalent of being knighted. So Dr Kathleen, you're now a datuk, but also more importantly, you're also a nenek. You are the proud grandmother of Shen, who is about 5 days apart from my own son, Levi. What's it like being a grandmother in this pandemic?
I think it's the blessing of the pandemic has been the time I've been able to spend with him. I mean, normally we're at work and I work quite long hours, as you might know. And so, in the beginning, before the MCO started, I used to go to work and I wouldn't see him because he wasn't awake yet, or I'll come back and he's asleep. And then through the MCO, we've just had the privilege, because he lives in the same house as we do, to just see him grow up. So it's been such a delight, to have him in the house. And he's 4 generations here in my house. So my mother-in-law, that's us. And then, my big extended family, my kids, and then there's Shen.
So you're having a reunion dinner every day,
Absolutely.
basically.
Yes, it's a party every day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
He's quite an intelligent baby, isn't he? He started walking already. He's very interactive.
Yeah, he's very interactive. And he doesn't speak so much, but his sign language skills are amazing.
Yeah.
I was a proud grandmother.
So this is really, I think, really exciting to have this conversation with you today on grit, because, usually when we talk about how-tos in terms of leadership skills, we tend to go straight into the practical how-tos and the steps. But for today, it's a little different. We really want to reverse engineer what a gritty leader looks like. And if you're okay, Dr. Kathleen, I just want to ask you a few questions about your origin story, because I think it will be very insightful to hear what makes a leader of resilience. And, I took some time to think about what is a resilient leader. And I thought about you, actually, because it's not difficult to land with that conclusion. You are the mother of 7 great children. You are the group legal counsel for YTL Group. You are the program director for YTL Foundation. You sit on multiple boards, including being the chairperson of Alpha Malaysia. It's a wonder how you do it all, but also you are a wonderful leader on a personal level. And you are just really caring, and you show that care and love on a very personal level to so many people as well. So before we go into how you do all of that, I thought it'd be really interesting to find out what was some of your earlier exposure or experience, if you like, to grit. If you like, what was your first experience of grit?
I think it was really from my mother and my maternal grandmother. My maternal grandmother was an amazing woman. She was really tough. You know how they used to build them, right? And courageous. She was born in Indonesia. She wasn't Malaysian. And her mother died when she was very young, and her father remarried. I really don't know the extent of that relationship with her stepmother, but it wasn't very good. So when she finished high school, she jumped at the opportunity to go to Shanghai to study nursing. So when she was there, it so happened that my grandfather had been sent by his family to study medicine, to be a doctor in Shanghai. And they met there and they fell in love. And she decided that she would come back to Malaysia and marry him. And really never going back to Indonesia. I don't think she ever saw her father again. And, it was such a romantic story, isn't it? That you kind of in love and you do all this. But I mean, grandma was a seriously tough person. And she had to bring up 4 kids over the Japanese occupation. They ran away from town because the soldiers were all coming in and they had to go into the jungle. And my mother tells me of these stories of miracles where when they ran out of food, the forest will suddenly be filled with like mushrooms.
Wow.
And they'll just pick it up. And after the war, my mom said she never saw the mushrooms again. So yeah, it was tough having soldiers come, and it was tough life. And then she became a teacher, and right through to when she was almost 90, she was still teaching. She used to have tuition class, in her house, and she was teaching math to like little 6-year-olds. And it was then at 90 she had a stroke and she stopped teaching. But right till then, my husband Hong loved to chat to her because she'll grab hold of him when we visit and she'll start talking about the stock market because, she was still investing in the stock market at that time. So that's my grandmother, tough, resilient, pretty woman. And then my mother. So her daughter, my mother was her eldest daughter, and really very different temperament from my grandmother. My mother was soft-spoken. My mother was gentle. I think she was more like my maternal grandfather. And yet, she was sent to boarding school after the war. She went to Bukit Nanas Convent. At that time, they took in boarders, and they had Irish nuns there. And so she came to faith through the nuns. And my grandmother was this fierce atheist, and she's like, nonsense, you're not going to do this to my mom. And yet my mom, just quietly held on to her faith in the face of this real kind of opposition from her mother. And my mom then went on to Kirby. She trained as a teacher. And again, it was a real adventure. They were living in Kajang, small town. She had to go all the way. And I remember her telling me about the first time she went to Italy. They had a little trip when she was at Kirby. And she said this coffee that they had was awful. I had to take like 10 cups of water to pour into my espresso before I could drink it. And so she was quiet, but she was adventurous as well. And
that Italian coffee couldn't stand the match. Couldn't match against our old town stocking coffee.
But my grandfather had a coffee shop, and that's what they made. So she was.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and. So, behind my mother's soft-spoken exterior, this was a woman of grit, and she faced opposition, but she held on to her faith. And I think having these two women in my life just modeled grit to me. And then when I got married, I had my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law is another amazing, and I think she must be one of the most resilient women I know. She's now 88 and she's still strong in spirit and still courageous. And it's a real inspiration to me actually seeing my mother-in-law and living with her every day in the same house.
That is so inspiring. Just hearing this story of the three women of grit in your life. And we'll talk about a different work ethic, right? Teaching till 90. It's just incredible. I was thinking about this quote by Angela Duckworth, who did this really popular TED Talk on grit some years back. And she said this: nobody wants to show you their hours and hours of becoming. They would rather show you the highlight of what they've become. And I think what you've just shared just in the last few minutes is a bit of the backstory for, people who've lived lives, years and years of just sticking true and just following up and just being determined and self-disciplined for decades. So for you, having that early exposure and being led under the role models of these three women in your life right now, in your career, and you hold so much, both professionally and in your family, how do you live on a day-to-day basis, especially in a season like this, where our grit is really tested? What have you learned about grit?
I think, purpose is really important, right? I think if we are strong in purpose, we can find in ourselves, and I think in our faith, the purpose to go on. Like at this time, so many people are saying, life is tough. Yeah, mentally it's difficult to carry on. But I see that the people who have real focus, who know what they're doing and feel a sense of their own worth, right, in what they're doing, they are faring well. But the people who are kind of have always been self-doubters, who are not sure whether they're in the right career, this has been a difficult time.
Has this sense of purpose and worth in what you do been tested in your own, maybe in your own career journey? If you could look back at a significant moment when your resilience was tested, what does your mind tend to draw you back to?
Yeah, I think it must be one of the most difficult experiences in my career was, as you said, I'm group legal advisor for YTL. And in the early 2000s, we acquired Wessex Water in the UK. We worked really, really hard on the bid. We had teams working on it. And then we lost, or we thought we lost. And then by a miracle, we were given the opportunity to rebid, and then we won it. And it was, at that time, such a huge coup. We were a little Malaysian company, nobody knew who we were. And it was soon after the Asian financial crisis, and where a lot of companies were still feeling really bruised. And so acquiring a UK water and sewerage company against competition like the Royal Bank of Scotland, Chung Kong Infrastructure, that was really something, we thought, wow, we've really made it now. And the British press was so surprised that this could happen, that, they carried this headline. The Daily Telegraph carried a headline that said, "Who the hell are YTL?" After we announced that.
It even rhymes.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that was what they were trying to do. And but the euphoria of winning was really short-lived. About 3 months after we completed the acquisition, I received a phone call one day in my office from the CFO of Wessex Water telling me that our CEO, Colin Skellett, had just been arrested in a dawn raid by the Serious Fraud Office. And I couldn't think, and it was just going through my mind, did we do something wrong, regulatory-wise? Did we not do something, to clear the Competition Commission or something that was a crime? That, what could we have overlooked? Poor Colin was in a lockup. The press were outside the police station. And then this news was just starting to go viral. My office is on a different floor from Hong's, my husband, and we worked together. So I rushed to inform him. And then we found out that Colin had been accused of taking a bribe from us to sell Wessex Water to us. And that could be what was the furthest thing from the truth, but that was the accusation. And so we called our friend Gerald Pereira. He's a lawyer as well and an elder in his church. So, we said, come, Gerald, we just need to pray about this. So he arrived very soon after with his Bible, and he read Psalm 91 to us. And how comforting those words were. At the time when there was little that we could do, we were so far away from Colin, and we just had to pray that God would take us through this journey and would vindicate us. And we prayed Psalm 91 a lot during those days. Every time we met with some people, some of our friends, we would bring out Psalm 91. It was such really, really dark days. Having to answer to police investigations, having to keep the morale of the staff high. And what had actually happened was really that we paid Colin a sign-on bonus, which is, in corporate deals, not unusual, because we were totally new to the industry and we needed him to keep the whole organization going. And so we made a deal with him. We paid him a sign-on bonus. But because the press had made this whole hoo-ha about who the hell are YTL, why is this company able to buy one of our great assets in the UK? So when they found out that, he had received, the bank kind of said, tipped off, there's money in his bank account from us. So they immediately said, we've got it now. Now we know the reason why we've won. It took us 6 months, of this pain of Colin, really being kind of in a very, very difficult situation until the police, after their investigations, concluded that really, this was a big, big mistake. And and we at the time, having to not travel to the UK, having to deal with things from a distance. It was really, really dark days. And I can remember so clearly when we got the message that the charges were dropped. It was just after Chinese New Year. And we had gone to Pangkolau, with the family and with the kids. They were all quite young at the time. And we got the good news, that the charges were dropped. I was so happy.
Just double celebration that year.
Yeah, it was, just like so exciting. And I just rushed to my computer, started drafting the press release to say that, all charges had been dropped. And just as I was kind of like pressing enter the last sentence, my nanny rushed into my room, carrying my youngest son, who was about 4 at the time, and said, he's been bitten by a snake.
Oh.
And I was like surreal. I just remember kind of like looking at her, looking at him and thinking, this can't be happening. We've just gone through this real trauma. It's the end. We've kind of thanked God for getting us out of this difficult predicament. And now my son has been bitten by a snake. And so we said, okay, let's rush him to the nearest hospital. It was across in Manjong. We had to take a boat across because we were on the island, and just praying all the time that, it was a grass snake or something. So got to hospital. He didn't look too bad, actually. He was still kind of joking with the doctor, kind of fancifully telling him, I think the snake was like a black and white snake that I saw. Yeah. Then the doctor said, oh, really? Kind of like, oh my goodness, what kind of snake is this? Oh, no, doctor. Actually, I saw it on National Geographic. So anyway, that was done. But anyway, so they ran some blood tests, as they normally do, to see, whether it was a poisonous snake. You can tell from the blood test. And they came back and they said, the doctor said, it's a mistake. I am sure it's a mistake. It shows that his blood is not coagulating. The coagulation factor is low. But I'm sure he's not been bitten by a snake because he looks fine to me. So he said, I'll run the test again. So we stayed overnight at the hospital. He ran the test again. The next day he said, you can go. And I said, how was the retest? He said, it still showed the same thing, but he's fine. So, go home with your son. So we were just grateful, forgot about it. A few months later, I went for some blood tests and some screens. And they did this funny test called the viper venom test. And I said, what is this? Why is it called viper venom? And then the doctor explained to me that when a viper or a dangerous snake bites you, what happens is your blood coagulation will reduce. And that's why, it's dangerous. You may bleed and these things. And so when I told him what happened to my son, he said, well, I think he was bitten by a viper. That must be it. And he said it's miraculous that he didn't feel any pain, because that's what normally happens when you get bitten by a poisonous snake. You'll be in pain, you have fever or something, but nothing happened to him.
Wow.
Yeah, and then suddenly remembered the words of Psalm 91, right? He will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the lion and the serpent. And nothing will happen to you, right? God is protecting you. And it was just such an amazing message from God that I have been with you all through this time. And this is just a sign that you might have trampled on your son on a snake and been bitten by a poisonous snake. And yet his full protection was on him. How much clearer can it be, right? That God is with us in all our troubles.
That's amazing. Well, thanks for sharing that. And that was quite the Chinese New Year that year.
Good and bad, and exciting.
But I just love that, because I think just by hearing your answers to the last two questions, it's very clear that what's behind grit is not so much the inner resources of a person. It's not an individualistic attribute, but just from hearing you, Kathleen, you talk about your role models and you talk about your God. You talk about reference points of relationships that you can trust. And I think just looking at Psalm 91, it ends with, because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. And so clear that there is a sense of dependence on relationships that you can rely on. And that's where you get strength for what you are going through ahead. If you were to speak to people who are listening in right now, who are maybe in the thick of a challenge, whether it's relational or career, and we're all going through, life in lockdown right now in the pandemic. So all of us are having our grit tested. In many ways, our resilience is tested on a day-to-day basis. What advice would you give to someone in the thick of it? What would be some practical ways that you'd say can develop and grow grit?
I would say, kind of from my own experience, is firstly, find a role model, right? A mentor, or someone you respect that has lived through hard times. And then listen to their stories and be inspired by them. Like in my case, it was my mother, my grandmother, my mother-in-law. You don't have to look far. It could even be your helper at home who's just had a really tough time, coming maybe from afar to just earn a living to support her family. So, just look around you and find someone. And just look at them and their situation and find strength in their stories. And then secondly, I think don't do it alone, right? That's trying to do it alone, and it's a very lonely place. And so when you find yourself in a difficult situation, go to someone you trust and just ask for help. If they love you, they will help you. I mean, their friends and family always willing to do this. Just having that comforting shoulder to cry on will help a lot. And for me, it's been walking my journey with my husband, Hong, that gives me strength every day. And then, finally, I think what really you can do is when you wake up every morning, you just you consciously tell yourself that God is with you and that He won't forsake you. In the Bible in 1 year, which I read every morning, I think we just finished the story of Job. And I can't think of more resilience, an example of resilience than Job. But he made it through. He made the story ends wonderfully. And that's because he never doubted that God was always walking with him. So I think, just that, find yourself a role model. Don't do it alone. And just know that God is always with you.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathleen. I love how you've demystified what perseverance and resilience looks like. And this idea that courage comes from encouragement, that we don't need to look very far. Actually, there's so many models of inspiration around us, even those who are living at home with us. So thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I just found this really inspiring. And to those who are listening in to this, I hope you found this helpful and hopeful as well. Have a great week ahead. We're cheering you on. And till next week, we'll see you for the next episode of On Leadership. God bless.
Thanks for listening to On Leadership. We hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, why not share it with a friend or post it on social media? Whatever platform you're listening on, don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow and turn on your notifications to receive more great content from HTBB.